Hello and welcome to another Relationship Success Support Hangout. Tonight our topic is moving in together for the first time with your partner. And we have guests with us tonight. We've got Joao.
Hi,
Say
everyone.
hi, Joe. And we've got Garb and Dan.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
So it does seem like we have a slight lag in time, so just bear with us. We are in the three corners of the world, you could say. So I think we're just going to jump right in and start off with those moments in the relationship leading up to making the choice to move in together. How does that usually go? And we'll be sharing some personal experiences within that. And let's start off with generally. Sorry, Garb, did you want to say something?
No, I'm saying.
Oh, no, sorry. Okay. So, generally, when you're moving in with someone, it's going to be at a point in your relationship where both of you are feeling like your partner could be the one that you're going to spend your life with. You know, you're not going to move in with someone who you don't feel that way about unless there is something particular happening within you, but we're not going to be focusing on that aspect tonight. For now, we're focusing on the general common experiences that people go through. So you're at that point in your relationship when you're wanting things to get more serious, and making that choice to move in together can be exciting, but also it can cause a lot of stress and anxiety for both partners, because yes, there are a lot of logistics involved, but also you're now going to be sharing your space and sharing your everyday life with someone else, where before that's not necessarily something that you were doing, or if you were doing it with family members, which would have been a more a comfortable relationship where everyone knows where everyone stands. When you're moving in with your partner, you're going to be in a position where a lot of the time you don't know entirely where you stand with each other. A lot of relationships, people experience themselves and each other like that. So would any of you guys like to share any particular experiences that you had in that beginning phase of first deciding to move in with your partner?
In the very beginning, when we decided to move in together, we kind of had a goal. Like we knew where we wanted to do, or like how we wanted to empower each other for the rest of our lives. So the commitment was stable. We knew that, or at least from my perspective, and so we kind of it wasn't as daunting for me because I've traveled a little bit before, and so kind of getting away from my family and moving in with like an unknown factor. This one, it was to me it was like exciting, and definitely there was there's a lot of things that come up when you move in to an environment where you're kind of like constantly you're getting like a new mirror because I'm kind of seeing people as mirrors, and so I've never seen myself through her before, and there's a lot of myself that I would not have seen maybe for a very long time if I did move in with her. And so making this decision to commit to be with her was kind of like a commitment for myself to move through all of the kind of dirty baggage in my character, and it's very intense at times.
Okay, cool. Um, so that is a very interesting point to bring up, that being with someone, let's say, okay, it's not going to be 24/7 because most people are working. So being with someone for such a large part of your life, you can't avoid each other when you're home. So as Dan was saying, you start having to face past parts of yourself that you've never faced before. And the funny thing about relationships is that you tend to bring the worst out of each other. So a lot of relationships go through these patches where there's a lot of conflict when the excitement of a new relationship wears off and you're starting to really get on each other's nerves. Though interestingly enough, it's not so much about the partners irritating each other, it's more about each individual having to face these parts of themselves that they don't know how to deal with. And what makes it more complicated is that so many people don't know how to communicate effectively, especially when they're in a conflictual situation. So that, let's say, the skill or the ability to, when in a moment of emotional reaction, breathe, take a step back and get back to a point of stability within yourself, hasn't been developed in many people. So you have two people coming together, facing the worst parts of themselves and not knowing how to deal with it, and then kind of clashing together like this. And further to that, not knowing how to help each other, essentially. So it becomes, a lot of the time, it becomes a very intense blame game, where each partner is blaming the other one for their experiences, and neither of them are seeing the step that needs to be taken, which is the step of taking responsibility for yourself, and then after having done that, being able to take responsibility for supporting your partner more effectively. So this conflict topic, I am sure that someone has some interesting stories to share on this particular topic. Who would like to share?
I would like to give a bit of the perspective, what I've faced, what I've experienced. My situation was different than what Dan described, specifically because I live in London, but I'm from Portugal, and I went to England to study music. And so from a young age, 19, that's young, I started to share house with different people, with students, and that in itself is a challenge and quite messy at times, for many different reasons, but it is quite messy. And so I had that experience for 4 years during my studies, and I developed a relationship with a girl, Joanna, who was still in Portugal while I was in England. So we had a long distance relationship for about a year. And when she finished her degree, she said that she would like to move to London, and I was all excited about it because, you know, I like her, she likes me, we like to be together, we like to spend time together, so it makes perfect sense to me to move in together. So it was a kind of, and we had already a good, like a well-established relationship in what we wanted to create, how we wanted to assist and support each other to improve ourselves and so on. So when we moved in together, and if you know the London market in properties, everything is extremely expensive, so we couldn't really afford at the time to live by ourselves, so we were also living in a house with other people in a room. And at that time, you know, because of my experience with the other students, when I was living with my colleagues, I was already kind of used to how things run and how things should normally run. So the main thing in the house specifically that I noticed is just keeping things clean, and one of the main things to keep clean is the kitchen. That kitchen has always been a problem for mostly students. It's a mess and causes lots of problems. You know, you don't need to be in a relationship to know how messy a kitchen can get. If you just go in and live with other people, it will get very messy. So, and to establish like, not, I wouldn't say rules, but just a code of conduct in terms of how you should use the kitchen and keep it clean for the other, and so on. So that was a point that we faced from the beginning, that I faced from the beginning, and still today, sometimes we're just tired and it's like we leave it for tomorrow. So it's something that we deal with, and we're quite stable in that point. It's a very practical point. So that was my experience in terms of moving in together. It was something that was just obvious, and I was really excited about it. And there was no specific consideration of how is it going to be, if I'm going to lose my freedom or whatever. It was actually a point of expansion. I was looking forward to it. So that was beneficial. Now the problems came after, as it's been said, it brings the worst in you. I see that it also can bring the best in you, and that's definitely my experience, because you want to be better for yourself and for your partner, and if you want to create something with the other that is worthwhile, you have to change, you have to become better, and that will definitely, I see that it definitely assists to commit to being with someone and together working towards that goal. And that's definitely something that Joanna and I have been doing, and I've seen in a lot of people that's not really what happens. People just go into relationships and it's like they just let it roll and see how it goes, and this is who I am, this is who you are, and it's like two worlds colliding. And if you want to make a relationship work, you both have to change. I mean, there's no way around it, because people are all full of bullshit, and unless you clear that stuff, it's going to be a big pile of it. And so we're going through, walking those points of not only the house, but the relationship in itself, and how we have to change ourselves and starting to understand the other, and how the other operates, so that you also can assist the other. That's something that I've faced and realized, is that any reaction that might come up within you about anything that the other might say or might do, or if we're in a conflict, I've realized that if I'm not able to stand stable within that point, even if the other person is reacting, and if I react back, then I'm not actually standing. There's a point I'm missing, that I'm not looking at myself and trying to face and correct. So, and this has happened, for example, just recently, Joanna and I went shopping, and like it's common for a lot of girls, maybe I'm generalizing, but I think it's quite true. It takes a girl quite some time to choose a pair of shoes or a pair of trousers, whatever. So Joanna was taking quite a lot of time for me. That's a long time. I just go in the shop, I look at the shoes, I like the shoes, do you have my number? Thank you very much, bye-bye. It's very quick. For Joanna, it takes a bit longer, because so I like this one, and so on. So I was kind of getting to that point of frustration, like, come on. But then I was like, all right, enough. I'm going to stand here. And I started to actually supporting her. So in terms of let's sort this out. Let's choose some shoes. And I was checking numbers and everything. So I was actually almost selling her the shoes, if you want to say that. So it's really about working with the others, trying to take the point back to yourself and seeing, why am I reacting? How can I change in this moment so that we can actually grow as within the relationship and make things work better for everyone.
Cool. That's some very very supportive points there, and it opens up one dimension that is very important to consider in a relationship at this phase or stage of a relationship, which is setting down those guidelines for the practical parts of your lives together. Because when you're sharing a space, there's a lot that comes with it. Like Joe said, keeping the kitchen clean. People don't like living in other people's messes. And if you don't establish those particular guidelines within your relationship, it starts becoming a very it becomes a big red button, and the more things get left, the bigger the button gets, which means the easier it gets to push the button. And that means that basically it becomes a big point of potential conflict, because now it's not about who are we in our relationship together, it's about, why aren't you cleaning up after yourself? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And to add to that, so often people don't say anything at all. They just keep the anger inside, and then one day it explodes into this big tirade of ranting at the partner for all of the hundreds of little things that they've done over the last 6 months, when you didn't actually go to your partner and say, this is something that has been happening in our space together. I am not comfortable with it. This is how I've been experiencing myself in relation to it. I would like to discuss possible solutions that we can test so that we can both be happy in our shared space, because that is the point that you always come back to. You are now sharing space together. You're sharing your life together. That point of agreement needs to come through in all aspects of your life. And where agreement is not possible, a point of compromise may be necessary for one or both partners. And let's see if Dana or Gob would like to share anything at the moment.
Yes, I'll share my experience. So when Dan and I first decided to move in together, for me, I was moving from, I think I lived with my parents at the time, and our family it's a bunch of girls, so I have 5 sisters, and my parents are together, so we were kind of a close-knit family in terms of, hanging out with each other, being comfortable around each other. So, and I always had my place in that. I was pretty, I had a lot of freedom in terms of where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to move within the space. And yeah, so it was kind of set in stone how I lived in the past. And then moving with Dan, he was coming from California to here. We never lived together. We didn't really even hang out much. We met in South Africa. So, it's basically us moving in together was like, in a way, moving in with a stranger. I mean, we had talked, we had developed a relationship over the long-term, the long-distance relationship. But in terms of who he is and who I am, we didn't really know that about each other. So in my mind, in the beginning, I created, okay, based on what he's saying, this is how I think he's going to be, and, kind of projecting how it's going to be to live, and, having little ideas of how it's going to go.
The expectation is a big problem.
Yeah, exactly. So he moves in, and we start living together and realizing this is not how it's gonna go. So it kind of like, in a way, it crashed the whole expectations, desires of how I wanted it to be, and the reality of it set in. And within that, you have to either sink or swim, and I was challenged so much, like even in the cleaning point, the practical points. He had a specific way of cleaning. I have my specific way of cleaning. Did it align? No, it didn't at all. So you have to, within even the cleaning point, we had to walk a process to figure out how that's going to work. It wasn't easy. Nothing with us has come easy, really.
Agreed.
So we've had to face points, walk them, figure out how it's going to work, test points out. And in the end, it's the point of I'm gonna do the dishes, and in my mind create thoughts of how it's not being done right because Dan doesn't do it the way I want it to be done, and create that, and then eventually yell at him, create conflict. Or in that moment, I can take responsibility for myself, stop those thoughts, just do the dishes, put them in, the point is done, and move on. So that just is the kind of foundation point I've found within this agreement and living together is, am I going to go into my mind and blame him for this point, or am I going to take responsibility and just do what has to be done, and then, direct the point in the future, direct it with him in a conversation. And that's kind of how it's been, and it's been like a testing ground of how to live together. And through the 2 years that we've been living together, I'm quite surprised at where we've been and where we've come and how far we've come, and we're getting there. We're committed, and our agreement in the beginning has been, our foundation point has been living in what is best for all, and supporting each other to be the best we can be. So our resolve within that point has made the agreement where it is today. Like, we've stood that point, so that's why we're still here.
And to add that, one of the things I experienced is that when I lived on my own back in California, or with my parents, or in college, it was really easy to not see myself because I had so many people to blame in my world, my reality. So whatever, I could always dismiss points a little more easily. And then moving over here to where I have literally no network, and all I was living with is one other human, it's so easy to just, it's like all of my blame systems funnel into just her. So then that's all of a sudden, it actually became a little easier to recognize my blame, but at the same time, it was also like one downstream focus of like, she's the cause for all my problems. So that's definitely a point to watch out for when you move in together, because your social environment comes to a focus point of like one person, and that makes it easier and more intense in terms of like taking that personal responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And that point of blame is a very interesting design, because what do you know about blame? Anytime that you're blaming anyone in your life, that is the moment that you need to stop and look at yourself, because there's something within yourself that is not aligned. Either you're projecting your particular issue onto someone else and blaming them for it, or there is a misalignment within you where you're experiencing something and you have a particular reaction to it, or you don't necessarily understand the full context of the thing, and through that you make an opinion or a judgment about it, and then you impose that on other people in forms of blame and judgments and things like that. And like we've been saying, when you're living with just one other person, they become that focus point of everything within you, and everything comes out that much more intensely, and the choice is yours, if whether you're going to continue that pattern of projecting everything onto your partner, or are you going to use that as an opportunity to stop and reflect back to yourself, what is going on within you, how are you creating these experiences, what is not aligned within you, so that you can change yourself and so change your experience in the relationship. So that's a very interesting dynamic, and changing that dynamic can make a huge difference in a relationship. It can change that atmosphere of conflict and resentment into one of support and let's call it nurturing, where you're walking together and supporting each other in your particular paths that you're walking. So you're alone walking your process, but you have someone there who's helping you cross-reference, check yourself, reflect back to yourself, and that can be a great gift. So let's move on to the particular experiences that we go through in that new phase of a relationship after you've just moved in with someone. When you're starting to experience these particular challenges, how does that feel? What are the thoughts that you're having? What are you thinking about your partner? How are you feeling about yourself and about your partner? Does anyone have any particular experiences to share in terms of those inner experiences?
just quickly say a lot of my pre-programming or the way that I normally would do a relationship was kind of like focusing on the other person and doing everything and creating myself so that they'll like me. So I start like channeling my own expression through this kind of front, like you put on a front at the beginning of a relationship. So kind of like trying my hardest to guarantee that she's going to see me and judge me positively, and that definitely comes crashing down in time. And so it was kind of a stress in the beginning to try, to try to not do that because I kind of had a little bit of awareness, so I was doing it, but at the same time it was like so natural for me to shape myself according to how I perceive others will judge me, and so that was a lot of where I was at in the beginning.
Yeah, that is definitely that point of creating an image of yourself in a particular way so that your partner will like you, apparently. It's not sustainable. And unfortunately, especially what you see in movies and on TV, that seems to be how relationships are being portrayed everywhere. That is what you should do, that you should put on a front and you should not show someone who you really are until after you're married and they can't get out of the relationship anymore. It's definitely not a supportive or an effective way to walk through a relationship, because obviously you're being completely dishonest with yourself and with your partner, and having that as a foundation of your relationship without wanting to change it is going to take you to a point where either you're going to have a very unpleasant experience with each other, or you're going to have a very unpleasant experience within yourself, where that incongruency between who you're presenting yourself to be and who you really are, that constant facade that you have to put on, just becomes so exhausting and so difficult to sustain that it takes everything out of you, and you end up becoming depressed or making yourself sick. And no one wants to live that way. The point that anyone would want to get to is being at peace with yourself and being in a peaceful environment where everyone and everything is working together towards the betterment of your community or your shared space, or however you want to call it. I know that within my relationship, when my partner and I were first living together, the points that came up within me was this: after the honeymoon phase, I would have this constant underlying irritation towards him. Anything he did, I would want to snap his head off and smush it. And it was over the smallest, silliest things that didn't make sense. And I couldn't figure out why I was so irritated with him. It was only until I started looking at myself and realizing how much I was projecting my opinions and my judgments onto him that I realized that, oh crap, this is all about me. This is all about my particular issues that I've been projecting onto him and blaming him for, and taking my frustrations out on him, that that created this very unpleasant experience in our relationship. And while we were going through that phase, I was experiencing things like I didn't want to be close to him. I didn't want to touch him physically. I didn't want to even talk to him most of the time. And there was no rational reason for it that was standing out within my experience. It was a very a subtle undertone, and once I changed who I was in relation to him, meaning I took responsibility for myself and for the points that I was projecting onto him, it changed the entire dynamic of our relationship. And what was a constant resentment and conflict and irritation turned into an openness and sharing and a willingness to be there and support each other and really be willing to share points with each other without going through that experience of having all the fights about it, because the fights would only come about when either, well, actually the fights would come about when both of us were stuck in particular reactions. Have you guys experienced anything similar to that?
I'd like to share something, not in particular to what you said. I actually just realized the point as I was going through my memories. John and I have been living together for 6 years now. And as I was thinking, like, how was the beginning when we moved in together, I could not find any point that was like, this was a big problem, actually. So I was trying to see, what happened with our relationship, what has been happening. And I've actually realized during this hangout just now that I have, in a way, used being with Joanna, being with her, as a way to, for example, me supporting her in things that she faces, as a way of not actually supporting myself. So it's actually a point of, I'm doing good for others, so I don't need to be good for myself. I don't need to support myself. There's quite a twist on maybe the most normal relationship that people have, where, like it has been said, there's big conflict. John and I have been, if you look at how we live, we're pretty chilled, to use that word. Not to say that we don't have fights, that we don't have little conflicts here, that because we do. And we solve them quite quickly, actually. It's rare, maybe has happened once or twice where we left something for the next day to be solved, to be sorted out, to be clear. What I mean is, we speak about it, and we forgive it, and we solve the issue, and then we move so that we can next time correct it and avoid that point from happening. So I've realized that I've actually used her in a way as a point of distracting myself from myself. So it's like, I'm being for her, I'm here supporting her, so I've done my part. I don't need to now be good to myself and actually assist myself to change myself. So I wouldn't necessarily project a lot of my things towards her. There's some things that I do, but most of the things that, in terms of self-judgments and dishonesties and so on and so forth, it's like I avoid looking at them and I avoid projecting them. I keep it all inside, suppressed, and I assist my partner in this thing, in that thing, being good. And like Dan also said, like, I'm trying to be good in this aspect, in that aspect, hopefully to get some appraisal. I don't do it for appraisal. It's just so that I feel I'm doing something for myself to feel good about. So that's quite interesting to have this realization here now. So it's definitely also not a way to go, and trying to hide from yourself by being good towards others. So that's big deception, self-deception, definitely.
That is definitely a very interesting experience, and I think that those dimensions of relationships deserve their own hangout topic at some point in the future, because interestingly enough, it's not a rare experience. So I think that's something that we'll be coming back to. in the future. So Dan and Gob, would you like to share anything?
I'll share my experience with him when we first started living together. Basically, how I kind of dealt with the move-in and being with him, a new person, was the way he the way we interacted. It was, I basically was always trying to get away from him. So it was like I didn't want to face what he was bringing to the table, because in my reality, like the way I lived before, I was always the one in control of my whole. I was actually very, like, I was shy and quiet, so I kind of created my world around myself. So I always knew how I was going to be, where I was going to go. If people were going to be kind of conflictual, or, I didn't want to be around them, I just wouldn't be there. I would just do my own thing. So I was very kind of independent in my own way, in like an isolated type way. So he came to the table, and he's the opposite. He's very social and wants to always hang out and, be with me. And, I was like, no, I can't handle this. You're too close to me, like you're too much. So I was always trying to escape, go to my parents' house, or go with Henry somewhere, or go to work, or do something to just get away from this apartment, basically. And so eventually I had to, like Cherie said, that irritating point, I had to face this point of, why am I trying to escape? Why am I trying to leave, not face this point? So, what I realized was, it was, judgments I had inside myself about myself in relation to him, and how I was perceiving him viewing me. So it was like this constant wanting to escape, because I didn't want to face the point of the actual judgments and responsibility of having to face those points, the judgment points, and face people, like that avoiding people. I had to actually face now with him, because he was here in my face. So I was either going to continue this pattern, continue this escapism, or actually face the point. And once I did face that point, move through it, now I'm here. Like, I'm not escaping, I'm not moving away, I'm not trying to get away from him. We're more together now. We're more able to communicate, solve issues faster, have more fun together. And yeah, it's been quite a process, but it's getting better in terms of, our togetherness, and really standing together in this agreement in this apartment. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think that that's a very important part of a relationship, is that moment that you realize that all the things that you blame your partner for, all the things that you're trying to get away from in your partner, is actually telling you something about yourself. And once you acknowledge that and start investigating that part of yourself, it opens up the door for not only your relationship with your partner, but your relationship with yourself to really grow and reach new depths that you hadn't been to before. Let's focus the last bit of our discussion on the solutions aspect of all the various points that we've discussed and shared so far. How did you practically walk through these challenges in your relationship? Meaning, what were the processes that you had to walk within yourself as a step-by-step kind of guide that you can share, that anyone who's watching this who relates to your experience can use and test for themselves within their own life? Who would like to begin?
I'll say something. It took me a while to get to this point, but I started to realize this trend in myself where the kind of things that God would say to me, and kind of maybe, it's like when you try to support somebody, but you do it in a way that's like really hard to hear, because it's like coming off as like, it's like like getting like slapped, almost like verbally slapped, like you know, you got to do this and you got to do that, and then, you know, my natural instinct would be to be like, no, you know, I'm bigger and da da da, I'm not that. So there came this point where I started seeing that when she was speaking, if I could just like, you know, effectively listen to the points and see where she was right, and looking at myself and having to take that responsibility and ownership over these aspects of myself that I did need to change, I noticed that came with a really kind of intense feeling in my gut, especially, where it was like, like I felt really like it was like a stepping down. Like instead of my ego rising up to the next level to be like, no, I'm more correct in my perspective, for me to step down and be like, oh yeah, I think I did maybe miss a couple of points here, and I do have to walk a correction process. That's a tough pill to swallow. And breathing, using my breath while listening to her as a way to release that feeling of like, it's like a loss feeling, and like a taking the inferior position, almost like a teacher-student relationship. That it comes with a real negative feeling, and using my breath to let that go so that I can sort through her words, even if I judge them as being sharp and derogatory, demeaning, still I can, you know, let that feeling go, look at what she's saying, and then use what she's saying as a framework for me to look at it for myself. So then it's not this fight and separation point, but rather now I'm using her words as a way to support myself in an investigation, like a voyage, a new investigation for how I want to look at myself and self-discover additional points of responsibility that I haven't been taking yet. And so just watch out for that feeling, because it is uncomfortable to acknowledge responsibility where I haven't been taking it before, and then using breath to move through that feeling and apply kind of an unconditional listening when she's speaking.
So I'll share now. I suppose Gareth will finish or speak after me. One of the things that Joanna and I have faced in terms of how to deal with problems, I'll speak about 2 points. One point is, for example, the dishes. This has been something that we're still dealing with it. We're, although much better now. At the beginning, we would quite react towards each other, like Joanna wouldn't do the dishes, and I said, Joanna, the dishes, reacting. And then it would be the opposite. I wouldn't do the dishes, and Joanna would be like, Joe, the dishes, what's happening? So we'd kind of both react, and it would spark a bit of a sort of a fight, and then say, okay. Nowadays, when we notice, you know, the dishes point is still not aligned, we're more like, Joanna, we need to make a better effort to get these dishes sorted. So it's no longer an emotional, it's more like trying to remind, because we both need to work in it. So it's a reminder, it's more like a reminder to ourselves and to the other, like, all right, we need to push ourselves to get this better. So it's more practical now. The second point, and this is one of the things that I find has been most supportive for our relationship, is when Joanna and I have a fight about whatever, you know, but it's those fights that can get emotional, not little things that it's meaningless in the end, and you forget about it after 2 minutes. You know, it's as if nothing happened. So it's those fights that we get emotional about it. What we do is like it gets to a point where there's nothing more to say. You know, and either we shut up or one of us says, okay, enough. And then for a moment we stay quiet, and it can be 30 seconds, it can be a minute or 5 or even half an hour, where, you know, we're just still doing our things, not speaking to each other, and then it's like we meet and we hug, and that hug is like a complete letting go of the whole emotional point that we faced at the time, and that really supports us to let go of that conflict, and to then start to look at what actually happened, why we're reacting, why did you say what you said, why did I say what I said. And the point is, We never go in to talk about it, to continue and blame and the fight in a more intellectual and calm way. It's never about it, because then it's another fuck up. Sorry about the language. Anyway, so what we do is with the hugging, we're like breathing deep and that's like a total release of it. And then when we talk about the point, it's always looking back. It's never you said this, blah blah blah. It's more I said this because I'm experiencing that, because I felt this because the other day that. So it's like explaining the point, but saying I, not you. So that's very supportive, because when you say I, you're bringing the point back to yourself. You're taking responsibility for it. And then you can also assist the other. I see that you've done this and that, and the other does the same. So this is one of the things that has supported us the most to have a quite effective relationship, and to transcend points and to move and to just better ourselves. Stop, hug, talk about it, or even write about it before or also after. It doesn't matter. The point that matters is that you sort it out in that moment and don't let it accumulate. Because if it accumulates, then divorce. And that's not cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's a very cool suggestion for any relationship partners to test, is that point of using that moment to stop, come together in a hug, let go, wait until you both get to that point of release, calm, letting go, and then from that point, from that stable starting point, then you start opening up, discussing what is the actual issue within me. Okay, share each other, listen, offer support, and create that safe space where you can really discuss points openly from that starting point of support. Now we're basically at the end of our hangout, and I think that an interesting point opened up before the hangout went live, as we were discussing, which is a particular experience that Dan and Garb have been going through, and I think that that is a perfect topic for the next hangout, which is conflict in communication, conflict with your partner, how to deal with conflict in your relationship in this particular context. So maybe Dan and Garb would like to join us for that hangout. We will keep everyone updated, but for the moment, let us read this comment from Marzana, where she says, "Hi guys, thanks for sharing your experience. I'm not in a relationship, but remember when I was, and I was blaming my partner often for many things, and it is a challenge for two people when they move in together. And unfortunately, we give up too easily. Thanks for taking the time to write that out, Marzana. And for the moment, does anyone else have any last comments, any last perspectives, anything to share before we end off?
I could say it's cool to, I wrote a note that creating space together, like physically arranging the room when you're moving in, that's kind of cool. We didn't do enough of that in the beginning, and as we started doing that more, it kind of like, it made the whole living environment a little bit more comfortable. That was cool to do.
Okay, cool. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining, and we will be back again next month, depending on when the guests will be available. Thanks, guys, for joining us, and see you next time.
Thank you very much. Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.